I gotta say, I miss the 90s. Well, not the Beanie Babies, and definitely not the way I dressed back then, but the mixtapes. If you weren't a kid in the 80s or 90s, you may not know how hard it was to share your favorite tunes with your friends. Oh yeah, I'm talking about a Michael Jackson, Phil Collins, Paula Abdul mashup. Perfection. To capitalize off of that nostalgia, but with a hipster twist, we're going to create a brand new app called Mixed Vinyl, a store where users can create mixtapes, complete with Boyz II Men, Mariah Carey, and Smashing Pumpkins, except pressed onto a vinyl record. I might need to put a record player in my car. The page we're looking at, which is super cute and changes colors when we refresh, is not a real page. It's just a way for Symphony to say hi and link us to the documentation. And by the way, Symphony's documentation is great, so definitely check it out as you're learning. Okay, every web framework in any language has the same job: to help us create pages, whether those are HTML pages, JSON API responses, or ASCII art. And pretty much every framework does this in the same way, via a route and controller system. The route defines the URL for the page and points to a controller. The controller is a PHP function that builds that page. So, route plus controller equals page. It's math, people. We are going to build these two things kind of in reverse. So first, let's create the controller function. In Symfony, the controller function is always a method inside of a PHP class. I'll show you. In the source/controller directory, create a new PHP class. Let's call it Vinyl Controller, but the name could be anything. And congrats! It's our first PHP class. And guess where it lives? In the source directory, where all PHP classes will live. And for the most part, it doesn't matter how you organize things inside source. You can usually put things into whatever directory you want and name the classes whatever you want. So flex your creativity. But there are two important rules. First, notice the namespace that PHPStorm added on top of the class, app/controller. However you decide to organize your source directory, the namespace of a class must match the directory structure, starting with app. You can imagine that the app namespace points to the source directory. Then, if you put a file in a controller subdirectory, it needs a controller part in its namespace. If you ever mess this up, like you typo something or forget this, you're going to have a bad time. PHP will not be able to find the class. You'll get a class not found error. Oh, and the other rule is that the name of a file must match the class name inside of it plus .php. Hence, vinylcontroller.php. We'll follow those two rules for all files we create in source. Back to our job of creating a controller function. Inside, add a new public method called homepage. And no, the name of this method doesn't matter either. Try naming it after your cat. It'll work. For now, I'm just going to put a die statement with a message. Good start. Now that we have a controller function, let's create a route, which defines the URL to our new page and points to this controller. There are a few ways to create routes in Symfony, but almost everyone uses attributes. Here's how it works. Right above this method, say #, open bracket, close bracket. This is the PHP 8 attribute syntax, which is a way to add configuration to your code. Start typing route. But before you finish that, notice that PHPStorm is auto-completing it. Hit Tab to let it finish. That nicely completed the word route for me. But more importantly, it added a use statement up on top. Whenever you use an attribute, you must have a corresponding use statement for it at the top of the file. Inside route, pass slash, which will be the URL to our page. And done! This route defines the URL and points to this controller, simply because it's right above this controller. Let's try it. Refresh and congratulations! Symfony looked at the URL, saw that it matched the route, slash or no slash is the same for the homepage, executed our controller, and hit the die statement. Oh, and by the way, I keep saying controller function. That's commonly just called the controller, or the action, just to confuse things. Okay, so inside of the controller, or action, we can write whatever code we want to build the page, like make database queries, API calls, render a template, whatever. We are going to do all of that eventually. The only thing that Symfony cares about is that your controller returns a response object. Check it out. Type return, and then start typing response. Whoa, there are quite a few response classes already in our code, and 2 are from Symfony. We want the one from HTTP Foundation. HTTP Foundation is one of those Symfony libraries, and it gives us nice classes for things like the request, response, and session. Hit Tab to autocomplete and finish that. Oh, and I should have said return new response. That's better. Now hit Tab. When I let response autocomplete the first time, very importantly, PHPStorm added this use statement on top. Every time we reference a class or interface, we will need to add a use statement to the top of the file we're working in. By letting PHPStorm autocomplete that for me, it added the use statement automatically. I'll do that every time I reference a class. Oh, and if you're still a bit new to PHP namespaces and use statements, check out our short and free PHP namespaces tutorial. Anyways, inside of response, we can put whatever we want to return to the user: HTML, JSON, or, for now, a simple message, like the title of the mixed vinyl we're working on, PB and Jams. Okay, team, let's see what happens. Refresh and PB and Jams! It may not look like much, but we just built our first fully functional Symfony page. Route plus controller equals profit. And you've just learned the most foundational part of Symfony. And we're just getting started. Oh, and because our controllers always return a response object, it's optional, but you can add a return type to this function if you want to. But that doesn't change anything. It's just a nice way to code. Next, I'm feeling pretty confident. So let's create another page, but with a much fancier route that matches a wildcard pattern.